Alright, we've created the beginning of our map, but we have a lot of refining to do. And this is a great time to talk about something, especially if you're doing a much larger map than this, that is very handy when you're running around trying to modify your map. And that is setting places. Now I want you to remember Control and then any one of your F keys. And we can maneuver to a spot. In this case we'll say Control F1. And then we can maneuver to some other spots. Maybe we want to work over here. So we'll make this Control F2. And you can see by my arrow the little plus sign that pops up. And we're going to want to work over here for what I have in mind. So we'll make this Control F3. And then over here we'll make that Control F4. Now what that does for us is it sets spots that we can jump to, and instead of using the Control key we're just going to use Shift. So now if I hit Shift F1 it takes me back. Shift F2, F3, and F4. And that's just a little bit better way to get around your map, particularly if you're doing a very large map. And especially if there's not a lot of detail in the beginning to tell you where you've been working and what you've already done. In the case of this very small island, we can kind of see where we're at and what's going on, but perhaps you have a landlocked level and it's really, really huge and it's difficult to find your way around. Those keys can be really helpful for that. Now, since we're talking about landlocked levels, let's touch on some other things. We discussed earlier how with our terrain, if we only wanted water, we could go to Environment, and we could go down to Show Terrain Surface, and we could uncheck that and have the engine not render terrain anymore. However, what if you have a landlocked map and you don't want it to render the ocean, because rendering this ocean is very resource intensive? Well, we don't have any kind of true-false checkbox for our ocean. So what we have to do is basically just get rid of it altogether. So if we go up to Terrain and Modify, you'll see that along with Set Ocean Level, right above that we have Remove Ocean. And that will get rid of the ocean entirely. So if you are doing a landlocked level, then you definitely want to remove the ocean and not suck up all of those resources. And since we're talking about that, let's also talk about with a landlocked level, you can build it like we did and create a very flat area and then build in some mountains. Or you can do like we did when we procedurally generated our terrain using this, which of course gave us a terrain much like terrain is, where near the edges it was fairly low to sea level and tended to climb in the middle. Well, that's not what you want in a landlocked level because your player can fall off the world. So normally you would paint in mountains all the way around, something to block off view and make that world seem a little more believable. Now, if you procedurally create a terrain, you can go in under Modify and down at the very bottom you can invert the terrain, which will take those slopes that went from the outside and climbed up like they do here and invert that so that this is the low spot and near the outside edges of the map are the high spots. So that's just a nifty trick if you just want to quickly create a large terrain and then go in and modify it from there. That'll get you going nice and fast. But we've got what we've got here, and that's where we want to be, and we're just going to work on the terrain as we have it. Now, for the map that we're going to be doing, I want a little bit more mesa style mountains than these type. So we're going to go to Terrain, and right below Terrain we're going to click Modify. And that's going to bring up the same type of dialog we had under our terrain editor. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to flatten, and you'll see down here we have a pick height, which allows us to set a height that we're working with. But I'm going to be over here under flatten, and you'll see if my computer unlocks that we have this green arrow or this green circle that sticks to the terrain and determines our brush size, and then this yellow arrow with this line between it. That yellow arrow is saying where our flatten brush is set right now, which over here you can see is a height of 100. That's where, if we click, that's going to jump up to, and that can be a positive or a negative value. Now, that's certainly a little bit more than I want, so we'll bring that down somewhere around that 62 area. And you can see that that is really cranking all of this up. And that's fine for right now. And what we do is we get this mesa style flat top mountain, which is really what I want to have. But I'm also going to want our player to be able to get up there, which means we have to do, oops, never mind that, Control Z to undo. I'm coming out way further than I want to there. What we need to do is create a path up there. Now later we will get into how to do paths and roads, but that's a little bit ahead of where we're at right now. So we're going to do it just by molding our terrain. I want this to be very cliff-like. Now, it should also be noted that when you're in flatten or rise lower, if you hold down shift, you'll switch over to smooth, and if you look to the right, you'll see that smooth highlights when we do that. And that'll start to smooth out a lot of the roughness in this. And we can get a smaller radius going there. Give that a little bit more natural edging. Now I find it best to do a lot of single clicking back and forth. Just to do that. Just to smooth those edges some. Now, how are we going to get our player up there? Well, we're going to use this pick height feature that we really enjoyed using a minute ago, and we're just going to pick some different heights. Now we have this ground level here, and we start to slope up, so somewhere around there I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to bring that up. And then I'm going to do that again. Control. And I'm going to increase that size there. And you can see we're starting to step that up. And we're just going to repeat that process. And don't worry about these cracks you see in the terrain. As you work and smooth, those will go away. Sometimes it's just a camera error. Pick another spot. And another spot. And you can see we're building this step system. Now these steps are going to be way too big for our player. But once you've got this kind of laid out, you can go back and just do it again. Pick in between the steps, and we're going to lower our brush size. Lower our brush size again. I'm going to bring those radiuses down a little bit. And then we'll do that again. And you can see we're starting to get some nice level work there. And then we can go in with our shift tool. Let's click over to smooth. Let's bring that radius down. It's pretty good, maybe just a hair less. Switch back over to flatten so we can go back and forth. We'll hold down shift and we'll start to smooth that out. And as you can see, that starts to give us fairly reasonable natural path upwards. We can bring that radius down some more for tight areas. And just keep working with that, smoothing it out. We want to kind of get rid of some of these really messy edges here. And that's how we're going to create our path around the mountain all the way up. Now that can get very tedious, so we're going to do this for this mountain, and then I also want you to pause the video and vary the heights a bit, but do the same thing for both of these mountains. On this mountain, I do not want you to build any steps running up to the top, but on this one I do, and I want you to do it on the outside edge, starting between the two islands and bringing it up. You can bring it all the way around, or you can work it up like a back and forth windy path, however you want to do it. But I want you just to keep working with that and get some good practice in with doing that, creating this. Now bear in mind, you can also create other steps on here just for aesthetics. It may not be this is the path our player is going to use, but maybe you want to create a spot around here. It's got some higher spots. Gives it a little bit more natural feel. And you can do that all the way up. You can bring this in here and continue to create that. But somewhere in there we want one path going all the way up. I'll finish working this around, and then I will do what I want to do here. And as I know you will do, you can skip ahead in the video a little bit and see what I've done if you want to get an idea. But I'm not going to spend an hour of video time boring you to death watching me do the same detail work over and over. So we will end this video here, and when we come back we will have this terrain sculpted and we will talk about some of what we've done.